One of the most famous, most popular microphone preamps when it comes to voiceover, but also just in general, is the AVALON 737 SP preamp, the hardware. It's the AVALON VT 737 SP. It's a tube preamp, and it includes an EQ and a compressor, a tube compressor as well, and it has a very signature type of sound. Now, it's one of the preamps that people know about even if they've never owned one or even used one or seen one. It's just that popular. It's one of the pieces of equipment where I feel that the brand is bigger than the unit itself. Now, that's not to knock the sound that it creates and what it can do. I'm just saying the brand is so big that just people know about it. So I was lucky enough recently to come across one, and I purchased a hardware unit. It was used, and I've had one before, and I sold it for stupid reasons, but I've got another one, and what I thought would be pretty cool is to walk you through the settings, but it's going to be a little different. And many of you are familiar with my DBX walkthrough video where I actually show you how to set this thing up. But this, I think this video is going to be a little different because the preamp is different. It's not like, hey, here's the best way to get a good sound out of this unit. It's more like, here are all the things it can do. You can really set it in so many different ways, and it can sound good in different ways, and it can be used as a tool to do several different things. And so I thought what I would do in this video is walk you through the different sounds that it can make and kind of explain how and why you would use it for voiceover especially, but also just show you what it can do, because I think so many people talk about it, and so many people like the idea of having either the plug-in like on the universal audio platform. So this is just a chance to really like show you, hey, these are all the things that the hardware unit can do, and this is what it sounds like on my voice. So let's take a look. All right, I have switched over now, and I'm recording my voice on my TLM 103 Neumann microphone, and we are going directly to the AVALON mic input. The preamp is what we're using here. And if I change the meter, you can see it's jumping up and down just a little bit, but we are getting, let me raise this up here so I can get a pretty good level. I'm getting a level to where the peaks of my voice speaking on this microphone are just about 12, peaking, let's see, about 10. Go a little bit higher there, about 8. Okay, so that's pretty, that's a pretty good level without any compression. But so we're using a little bit of preamp gain. The output is set to 0, a little bit higher. So that's what this sounds like. This is the AVALON tube preamp. And before we were using an ultra clean, when I was on camera speaking to you, I was using an ultra clean Grace preamp. So you can kind of compare just the difference there. So I will say that I've got earphones on, and so by me going through, and I'm going to manipulate a bunch of different sounds that you can come up with on the AVALON VT737SP hardware. But I don't know if these headphones give me a really accurate representation of what I'm hearing. The highs are a little accentuated on these headphones, but I'll do my best to try to make up for that change, so you won't notice any difference. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the amount of tube saturation. So before we even talk about the compressor section, which is here, and the EQ section, which is here, what you can do is to change the amount of that gain and that saturation. So what you want to do is you need to lower the output if you're going to crank up the gain. Now this is where the saturation comes from, is the gain in the input, and this output amplifier is a clean to make up the difference. So it's really a ratio. When we talk about gain staging, it's a ratio between the two. So I'm going to turn this down so you'll hear a lot less volume, and I'm going to turn up the preamp gain. So the ratio here is higher on the gain, less on the output, and you should be noticing a little bit more of a thicker sound. So let me make the ratio now, so we're back to about the same level as we were before. So we have more gain running. We're using more of the tube preamp gain here and lowering the output. So the ratio is revealing an equal or fairly close recording level, but you can hear the tone is shifted a little bit, and we're getting more of that gain. So let me. There's one more step you can add. I believe it's 18 more dB of gain by engaging the high gain button. So we're going to have to even turn this down even more, and I'm going to give it to where we can almost pretty much push this into distortion. So now we've got a high gain setting on this mic, and we're cranked all the way up, and you can hear even a further different type of tone that you're getting from the preamp. And I'll tell you, you can actually see the thickness a little bit in the waveform, referencing the recording that I'm doing. And I'll switch to that screen so you can kind of see that there. So it's a little bit different, and I'm trying again to reach that the same recording level, and it's definitely a different type of vibe. It's got kind of an active, kind of electric kind of a feel to it. I don't know how to describe that. So now let's kind of put it back. Let's go back to where we were. Not the high gain setting. We're not using the high gain setting, and we'll put this back. I think the manual says around 35 dB is probably a good general setting. And now we're back again to that regular. So we're getting a little bit of preamp tone and sound, and we're using the output here to get the right level that we want. So I think that's a pretty good general starting position. Also, according to the manual, that's what it says as well. Let's move over to the EQ setting. I want to talk about the EQ. It's something that I would probably end up using in a very broad stroke, kind of a sweetening way. And if you've taken the EQ course that I have, those descriptions probably make sense to you. You know, you can use EQ in a surgical way where you're really dealing with just specific frequency areas, or you can use EQ in a broad, with really broad strokes that kind of change things a small amount, but make broad sweeping changes. I feel like you could actually do both, because it's a semi-parametric EQ, because you could change between a very steep curve or a wider curve for the two low mid and high mid bands. But we've got bass, low mid, high mid, and the treble. So there's really four channels you can mess with. So let's switch the. I'm going to turn these back so they're all at 0. We're not getting any kind of EQ. By just pressing the EQ in, it does give it a little bit of change. I'll do that again. Here's with the EQ engaged. Everything is set at 0. Without the EQ engaged, you hear just a little bit of a warmth, I think. I can hear that when you put it in. What I like to do is, for a setting that I like, is I crank up the bass just a little, just to give it a little warmth on this EQ. That's one of the things that I think sounds really good. But what I want to do is... and I think one of the benefits of doing this video is really show you the different settings and what they do for a voice. So if I put this at 15 hertz, that's really low, but it's more about the curve. So we're using a shelf here. And when I crank this up, and you can hear a difference, you hear those ultra lows coming up, you know, the center channel on this shelf is 15 hertz. And is that really making a difference? No, but it's about the curve going up into the higher material, up to the higher frequency. It's really more about where that curve is and how steep that curve is, and that's what's giving me the change in the bass. Here's no bass at all, and then we're cranking it up, and you can hear that warmth come through on my voice, and we'll go the other way where it's dropping some of that really low stuff. And the preamp also has a low or a high pass filter or a low cut filter here on the left side. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So I just wanted you to hear, so that's the 15. So now let's crank it to 30. 30 hertz is the center channel for this shelf, and we'll crank that up. You can hear a little bit more of the mids come through, because that curve going into the low mid area is affecting some of the higher frequencies. It's all about the slope of the curve when you're looking at that shelf. And so let's go to 60. So now we're starting to get into that audible territory there, where you can definitely hear a lot of low mids, and 150, and you can hear the difference if we crank that up here too. So there's the bass sound, and then I'll back it off. I just wanted you to hear the difference between those filters. I like the 30 setting for my voice. Gives it just a little bit of that warmth, and you don't need much. So here is with just a touch of that low bass. Take the EQ out, you can hear it without. And also, by the way, I have, there is no, the filter is not engaged here in the low cut. I want to keep that low energy so I can illustrate it here. So here's the EQ. You get that maybe 2 to 3 dB of the shelf and those low frequencies. So that's without it, that's with it here. Okay, that's what I like to do. For a low mid, I'm engaging the high Q, which is giving me a steep curve for this particular band of the EQ, and around 325, 350, 300, just in this area right here is where I know that some of my mud in this room on this microphone on my voice is kind of where that's at. So, you can just giving it a little bit, backing off 1 to 2 to 3 dB, just kind of cleans up the mud a little bit. And that's why it's they call that the Pultec curve a little. I think that's what that's referred to. You drop the mud a little bit, but increase the bass, and it gives it a particular curve, and it gives it a warmth without the mud. I'll take it out. 1, 2. Here is my voice without that EQ. Here is my voice with it. Very minor change, but I'll tell you that the changes you make with the EQ are amplified or really do affect the compressor when we add that later. But let me cycle through a few of these here. So by keeping the high Q in, I can show you that, when you crank this up, that's that mud frequency that we're talking about. And I could cycle through. Here's lower. So we're using a high Q and we're cranking it up 10 dB. And as you cycle through, you can hear the changes. So that mud around 300, 325 is really what I like to get rid of there. And, knowing these frequencies takes time. You got to mess with this for a while. You got to practice, and you start understanding what 300 means sonically. But again, I wanted to give you an idea of how the EQ sounds when you change it, and the changes that you can make and why you would make particular changes on a voice. Both the low mid and the high mid band have a 10 times frequency. So this, instead of 325, this is 3000, so that you can crank it up and it moves the band that much higher. It gives you that much of of play when you're choosing the frequencies you want. So you can really you carve out the frequencies you need to, and understand that this is also intended for musical instruments. You would maybe you'd carve out different frequencies in an electric guitar track or a bass guitar than you would on a voice. So generally, this is what I like to do with my voice, and here's why. Just to carve out a couple dB of that mud frequency that I find happens in my room on this microphone with my voice. Switching over to the high mid, and first of all, this EQ setting right now is what I like to use, and what I find gives me the, quote, AVALON VT 737 hardware sound. I like it like this, but I want to illustrate again what you can do. So around the 1K, maybe a little bit higher, 1.2K, this mid, and I'm not using a steep EQ curve. I'm using a broad curve, and I'm cranking up. You can hear those high mid frequencies. And let's cycle this a little bit so you can hear higher mid frequencies. We're in the 2K, 2.5K, 2.8, and you can even go higher, multiplying this by 10. Now you can really hear those higher frequencies. If I put in the high Q and lower this down, this is really taking away my sibilance but it's also taking away that frequency when I'm not being sibilant. So I probably wouldn't use it that way. But again, just showing you the capability and the leverage you have with this type of EQ. And again, just maybe I would, if I were to increase a little bit of mid-range, it would probably be around here somewhere. But for the Avalon, I don't personally, on my voice, I kind of keep this flat. And then we've got the high shelf. I think this is probably one of the more prominent reasons that the Avalon EQ is used, and it's for this air. Again, just like we looked at in the low frequency, it's really all about that curve. And so 15K is really high. That's the center frequency, but it's about that curve going up to the right when you increase this. And the more you increase this, the steeper that curve becomes, right? That curve, it's all about the curve. So that's 15. The center frequency is at 15K. And, consider that most microphones, they kind of, they'll capture audio up to 20K. So this is really emphasizing the air in my voice. Let's switch it to 10K so you can hear what that sounds like a little bit lower. Here's the 15K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's 20K. That's really, really high. You can hear the difference with it and without it. Here's the difference with that 20K without it. Let's do the 15. Without 15, with the 15. It's just that air, really high end, and it gives that breathy. They call it air because I think it accentuates the breath kind of sound coming through your mouth on a voice. So that's without it. That's with it at the 15. And then let's do 32 just so you can hear that. So it's really at the really high end. Again, that air, and for singing in female voices, this is a very popular frequency to add if you're looking for that with compression on it. It sounds beautiful. So again, for me, I tend to just kind of leave it without any. It's there if you need it, and if you have to use this for a particular reason or a style that you're going after. So let's take out, we'll take out the EQ, we'll put in the EQ. So it just gives it a nice round warmth, takes a little bit of the mud out. And, if you wanted to add some of the air, you can. This is one of the issues I'm having right now, is because to be able to do this with you on a microphone, I need to monitor with my headphones. And listening on my headphones, this sounds very bright to me. So I'm going to keep it, off for right now. So let's keep the EQ engaged, and we're going to switch over now to the compressor. So first thing I want to do is switch in the meter. So it'll show me, the meter is going to show me how much attenuation I'm getting with the compressor. And we will start by engaging the compressor, and we can start with let's start with a fast attack and a fast release, and we're going to drop down. Let's see, let's set it to about 3. Let's set it to a ratio of 3 to 1. That means for every 3 dB above the threshold that you're sending audio through the compressor, it's going to come out 1, 3 to 1, 3 in, 1 out. That's the ratio. And we start with the threshold all the way up, and as you lower the threshold, you're telling the compressor at what point you want the compression to start working. And I will tell you that one of the things I've noticed is when you start using the compressor, it's kind of based on how much preamp gain. The preamp gain seems to be very much directly related to the detection circuit. So I'm going to lower the output volume, give it a little more preamp gain, and now you can see if we're using lower ratios on the compressor, this way I can get a little bit more compression that way. So I'm going to make sure that we are using the right amount of output here to get what we need for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for an output level. Okay. So now I have enough leverage because of the preamp gain is increased to turn down the compressor threshold, so we're getting 1 to 2 to 3 dB of reduction. And one of the things I want you to notice here is that even with this much compression, you really start hearing a thick, bold difference. I mean, you don't have to do much compressing. 1 to 2 to 3 dB of gain. Reduction, and we're at a 3 to 1 ratio, so you're just getting a little bit of gain reduction on the compressor, but you can tell it's giving it a very big different sound. This is the AVALON 737 hardware sound. It's that big, bold, compressed, heavy, weighty, kind of a beefy sound. I think that's what people go after. But let me give you a few different flavor variations. So I'm going to back off on the compressor a little bit, and what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the attack. So I'm going to lighten it up the attack, I'll lighten the release, and then we'll bring this back down. So I believe this still has the size, and I'm going to have to lower the output just a little bit. This still gives you that big, bold sound, but it doesn't sound as compressed because I'm letting more of my transients, the P's and T's and the beginning consonant sounds of my voice, I'm letting those through the compressor. They're not being compressed. It's just immediately after those transients that's being compressed. And then the release time is a little slower, so it's bringing it back to the uncompressed signal level at a later time. So I believe that this gives you still, we're getting 1 to 2 to 3 dB reduction, and it doesn't sound, quote, it doesn't have the compressed sound. And I'll tell you what this offers, I believe. Why would you want to do this? This to me, this really kind of sums up going after a sound like this. I believe when you use a compressor and you use a little bit of EQ to accentuate certain parts of the voice, what this allows me to do is it allows me to, it's kind of sucking the voice out of my mouth. And instead of having to project, and you'll understand this if you do voiceover, I think you'll totally understand this. When you speak on a microphone, you sometimes will project, and it's what some people just are used to from either being on stage or when you have to address a room full of people or an audience in an auditorium. Projecting and actually pushing the voice out of your face is a thing, right? The using a compressor like this is exactly the opposite. I'm holding back my voice, and I can almost just whisper, and it's still extremely loud. And what that does, I believe, the leverage that gives me is I can make small changes to my facial expression. I can make small changes to my mouth and my eyes and my face. And I believe it gives you the leverage to let all that emotion come through the voice. This may sound completely foreign to you, but I think if you are someone that has experienced, using a compressor, I mean, I'm barely projecting right now, and I could really draw you in and describe a scene, or I think it really allows me to inject emotion into my speaking voice, and it gives you so much leverage to do that. That is why a compressor is valuable. But I'll tell you, if I shift in my chair, if I grab my shirt, you can hear every little thing, and so it amplifies just the lowest possible audio and signals that are coming through the microphone. And if you're using something like a TLM 103 or another cardioid large diaphragm condenser microphone, they're very, very powerful. So this really amplifies that power. Okay, enough of my psychology about projecting and projecting emotion. All right, let's try a few other things. I'm going to crank this up here. Let's do this. We'll put the attack down. Let me just give you another different flavor. I'm going to crank the ratio 7-to-1, and we're going to drop this down quite a bit. And I've got a fast attack and a fast release, so we'll lower the release just a little bit. So I'm now driving the compressor to get a lot of reduction, okay? And this now, what's happening is I want you to look at, because it's a fast attack, so it's clamping down on those transients soon. As soon as they come out of my voice, it's grabbing them and lowering them right away. And then you can see when I stop talking, the volume goes back up on the meter, bringing it back to that regular level. So this is a huge amount of compression, but I want to show you and prove a point here. So let's go back to the DAW and the waveform that it's recording. Look how smushed and recessed this the wave file is, and it's definitely has kind of you can see none of those big loud transients are coming through. It's clamping down on all of the transients, and it's doing a great job keeping them quieter. But so what I have to do now is raise up the volume. So let me go and raise the output back to where we were getting that other volume before. And I'll tell you, so now this is an ultra compressed sound. This is something you would use not for voiceover, but more for music, for a bass line or a guitar or overheads on a drum microphone. But I just want to show you this. I think you may be wondering, like, okay, Lenny, I'm never going to use this type of a setting. But I'll tell you, I want you to see what the settings look like and what sound this gives you. It's kind of like one of the limits of what a compressor can do and what that sounds like, and then you find a happy medium in the middle somewhere, which definitely is something that we would do. Let me lower the output, maybe lower the preamp gain a little bit, and what we would do is try to get 1 to 2 dB, maybe a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio. Open up the attack a little bit, open up the release, so it's not doing much. Even on a tube compressor, an opto compressor, even if the needle isn't moving almost barely at all, it's still making its signature on the sound. So you don't have to really have that needle move at all to really change the color of the sound. And I think this is probably a pretty good setting for this amp. It's not overly compressing. It's not giving you too much. I'm getting a little bit of reduction, a little bit of warmth, and it's giving the AVALON 737 hardware sound, but I'm not completely modifying or changing my voice sound. So, you could even do further processing after this. So let me just do a few other things for you. I want to show you, this is the EQ now before the compressor, which I think is a whole different sound. Actually, wish I would have done that sooner. I want to show you what that sounds like too. So let's crank this up again. I want you to hear what that sounds like, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's do this. I want you to hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're using the compressor after the EQ. EQ comes before the compressor. So this bass, this increased bass, this dropped mud is having an effect on the compressor. The more bass I have here it's actually triggering the compressor's detector circuit. That bass is making the compressor work a little bit harder because it's before the compressor. And I know, again, this is that really over-compressed sound, but I want you to hear what that sounds like, and I crank it back up again. I would definitely call this an extreme setting for a voice on an Avalon preamp and a compressor and the EQ. I just want you to hear what that sounds like. All right, let's back it off again. We'll go back here, maybe just 2 dB, open up the attack and the release a little bit, maybe 2, and then let's see, drop this down just so it's barely kind of moving a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, it's barely kind of moving. I think I prefer the EQ before the compressor. 1, 2, 3. I prefer the EQ before the compressor, getting 1 to 2 dB of reduction, and we're only using maybe 2.5, 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1 ratio, and we've got it this is a very natural setting. So you can use this on your voice. You're still getting a little bit of compression. You're getting the tube sound, you're getting the compressed sound, and you've got a little bit of EQ. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this would be a setting that I would call using it in a broad way. You're not doing very specific changing, but you're giving a nice, round, warm tube sound to your voice. And would you do some further processing? Probably. I mean, I would probably, depending upon what you're doing, but this is just a nice generic voice recording sound. I wouldn't be worried about processing after or processing this further, but I also think it's just a nice solid sound to have as a raw track if you're going to be tracking your voice for whatever kind of a presentation. So I hope that gave you an idea more about what this Avalon sounds like, what the capabilities are, what kind of leverage it has, and what kind of capabilities the compressor versus the EQ before and after. I want to add one more thing before I wrap this up, is the Avalon 737 hardware unit has a couple other tricks. It can do a few other things, and one of them is you can use this in a particular mid sidechain mode where it uses the low mid and high mid EQ, and it's a sidechain into the compressor. So it basically turns this unit into a preamp and de-esser. So you can tell the detector circuit of the compressor to only listen to the high mid and mid sections of the unit, and it basically will attenuate whatever frequency you set, and it could be used as a de-esser as well. That's just one of the things I think that may be good for another video at another time. The hardware is beneficial because it looks cool. It's hardware gear to have in your studio. I think there's a impression, gear factor to having something like that in your setup. It's heavy. It creates a lot of heat, and it's definitely it could be expensive not only to purchase but to repair if that's necessary. And as opposed to the plugins, you could set the Avalon plugin, leave and come back a year later, and it's going to be exactly the same. You can have specific settings and keep them, and they can be you could recreate the same sound over and over again. That's exactly and precise, what you can't do. So I will say that I think I believe that the hardware has kind of a round, softer weight, and I know those are just adjectives, and it's really hard to kind of compare. And what does that mean, really? It's all words. But in my estimation, that's the biggest difference. Is it worth the price to get the hardware? Let me put it this way. I think this is the biggest takeaway here. I do not believe that not having a hardware unit will prevent you from being a successful voiceover artist. I think that's the best way to put it. It was fun to go through that, and I'm going to do it with some other preamps that I have. I want to continue to do this just to share with you the vibe and the sound of some of the different preamps so you can hear what they do. And I know this is just on my voice. It's going to be different on everybody else's voice, but this way you get an idea of the capability and what they can deliver, what these preamp hardware units can deliver. So what is it that you feel is preventing you from reaching your voiceover goal? What is the challenges that you're facing? What's in the way? Is it your sound? Is it the quality of the sound? Is it what you think might be a problem with your sound, because that's a big thing too, right? Some people just say, I don't know if it sounds good when I send this to my client. All those things are totally real. And one of the services that I offer is a custom processing preset service. Basically, you send me a raw file and I'll send you back an example of what your processed sound can sound like, and I do that for free. All the details are on my website, but what this offers and what this is really doing for my clients and this service is it offers confidence, right? So wow, okay, Lenny went through this, he put this together, it's been balanced, it sounds good on different studio monitors, it's been referenced in a well-treated, professionally treated room, and I know this is going to translate on other systems, whether it's just, earbuds, somebody's listening on their phone, or car system, or whatever it is. It's the confidence, I think, that it's really valuable. So send me your file. Don't be shy. It doesn't matter at what level you're working at. I work with all types of people from all over the world. Send me a sample of your raw voice. The details for exactly what I need are up on the website. And then I'll send you back an example of what your voice could sound like processed, and then hopefully we could work together. Thank you so much for watching.